we will have a legendary sales team making life-changing money, being best in class, and having fun. You will learn more and become better at your job working on my team than you would have at any other team during that same amount of time. And you will never have to look for a job again because the halo of our success will be over your head for the rest of your career and people will seek you out. I said that to everybody on the team. That was my first day.
Ready to go? Dan, I am so excited for this, dude. I've wanted to make this one happen for a while. I am in awe of the Datadog journey and your role in it. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Man, I'm so happy to be here. Long-time listener, first-time caller. I've enjoyed your podcast for years, and I'm fired up for today.
It's very, very kind of you. But I just spoke to Carlos at Harness beforehand, and he said that I had to start with the mechanical engineering part. He said, why did you make the move from engineering to sales?
Well, I ended up doing mechanical engineering, just engineering in general, because I didn't have a lot of money growing up. I read a magazine in 1987 called U.S. News and World Report. The 5 or 7 top earning degrees all were engineering. And I was like, I don't know any engineers. I grew up in New York City, and my dad was a cop. We were living in the country at the time, very rural place. And so I seemed pretty good at math and science, and I got into it. I love technology. I always admired Steve Jobs and Bill Gates, and those guys were kind of heroes from my childhood. And I got a design job in Detroit using CAD/CAM software. And so I got pretty good at it. I wanted to go work for the company. And it turned out to be this company, Parametric Technology Corporation, or PTC. I went there for the technology, not realizing that they kind of possibly are the greatest sales team that's ever been put together. So this qualification methodology, MEDDIC, that everybody uses, that was invented there while I was there. Company was doing about $200 million a year, so they still had the DNA of a startup. And so I talked with them about just how they built an amazing qualification machine, pipeline generation machine, sales process machine. And I just happened into that as an engineer.
How do you build a really, really good qualification machine?
You got to expect that bullshit is there. You have to realize that human nature is such that you want to have the rose-colored glasses on. You want to believe the deal is good. And you need to know that the opposite is probably true. And you've got to look for the dirt. And you've got to build that into every time you're looking at a deal. You should be thinking about it. And now MEDDIC is a nice way to have a structure, a framework for this versus some meandering conversation that may or may not get to the answer, right? So your metrics, your economic buyer, decision process, decision criteria, identify pain, champion, competition. That's the way I look at MEDDIC. And so in that way, I can have a conversation in possibly even 15 minutes, but max 30 minutes. And I'm going to be able to qualify this deal. We're going to be able to look for the weaknesses and strengths. Yes.
What questions do you ask to qualify the deal? Are there some standard ones which will get you to a conclusion more substantively than others?
Yeah. So, the 3 whys in MEDDIC are: why should they do anything? Why should it be Datadog or whatever? And why should it be now? Right. And so asking those questions, this is some basic stuff, but that's the thing about sales is it's not quantum physics, but we talked about discipline before. We talked about repeatability. And that's a big part of this, is just always doing the right thing, even when there's so many excuses to not do it. And the same thing with asking the questions, same thing with MEDDIC. What metrics do we have that build some kind of business case, even if it's a back of the napkin kind of thing? Like, why should they do it from a metrics perspective? Do we have any metrics from previous customers that we can use to tell a story there? Economic buyer. Do we know who the economic buyer is? What I know from experience is it's probably 1 or 2 levels above whatever you think it is, whoever you think it is. So when the salesperson is engaged in the deal, they're going to think that the person who's the technical user, that's probably they're thinking that's their champion. That person's boss, who's really should be the target champion, that's who they think is the economic buyer, because it's just too hard to realize that the person who's going to sign is actually multiple levels above where you've even engaged.
How do we build a relationship with that buyer who's multiple levels up from the technical user without being patronizing to that technical user?
Well, in an ideal world, you're going to earn your way up, right? And so there's two different ways. And so the fact that I was at Medallia and Datadog back to back are two extremes. So at Datadog, we started with hands-on keyboards, the practitioner, the person who's actually implementing the cloud. It was crazy, man, because everything that we were told, everything that I was ever taught, and I taught, like come in high, get to power early. The reality is, so at Datadog, Amit, you've had Amit Agarwal on, right? Amit and I went on a series of dinners with Shardul Shah in early 2017, and it was all CIOs and CTOs. And we were so excited, and we went to fancy restaurants, and nobody cared about cloud monitoring. Everybody had just done big deals with AppDynamics and Splunk and Dynatrace and New Relic. And they said, we already have the cloud handled. We just did a deal with AWS. So they didn't want to talk to us at all. And I couldn't get them interested. Amit couldn't get them interested. Shardul couldn't get them interested. That's a lot of firepower. So it's almost like the nature of the market cycle was such that we had to focus on the people who were actually tasked with implementing the cloud successfully. And so we were selling to the people who were implementing. And the fact that Datadog actually worked, they could implement it. It told them things that nothing else could tell them. Then we built a groundswell from there. So even we got to leave your ego at the door and realize we're not talking to CIOs and CTOs. So to answer your question, we didn't talk to them for a while. And so now at Medallia, what we realized is we had to invent how to sell Medallia. That was before Datadog. People might not know about it. It was a $5 billion exit, which is pretty good back in the day when those were big exits before Datadog and Snowflake and companies like that. But we realized that we need them to change the way they're doing business. So we could only sell that product to the biggest companies in the world. And we had the prospect, forget about CTO, CIO. We had this. I did first meetings with CEOs, COOs, CEO -1 at like companies like Verizon and Toys R Us and, you name it, big companies, Capital One, Marriott, because we needed to convince them that they needed to change the way they were doing business. So two different answers to your question. One, at Medallia, we had to put together a value prop and a pitch that spoke to the people actually running the company. And at Datadog, we had to earn our way up over time and just recognize we weren't going to have the conversation with the CTO maybe for a year or two until it became a bigger problem.
Going back to kind of the structure, in terms of like intellectual honesty with ourselves,
yeah.
You said about kind of the why now? Why do they buy it now? Why do they benefit from it now?
Yeah.
It's very hard to say that you have to have Datadog right now. Otherwise, you're screwed.
So hard.
And next quarter will be devastating.
Yeah.
Everything can kind of be next quarter. How do you think about urgency?
Well, kind of, but brilliant question, because that's where the action happens. So to me, magical moments happen in sales, right? And so a magical moment is I call you and you're like, I hate salespeople. I don't want to talk to you. And all of a sudden you're like, this is interesting. I'm glad this guy called. I'm learning, I'm thinking, okay, that's a magical moment from a cold call. In a meeting when somebody has their arms crossed and they're like looking at their phone. And then they're like, wait a second, maybe I should get my boss in this meeting. That's a magical moment. And another magical moment is, holy shit, we need this right now. And so for example, we were working on a deal at Capital One they were the first, this is early 2017. So early 2017, I started Datadog. We've got a very good business that the boys created before I got there. And that was small deals, credit card deals, month to month, minimal human interaction, mostly almost entirely software startups who were born in the cloud. And so one of the things I talk about is don't F up what's already there and go build what isn't, right? And so I needed to build the enterprise, I needed to build channel, international, et cetera. And so the enterprise, there were really, in early 2017, this might be surprising to some people, is there really weren't any production applications in the cloud for the enterprise. And so Capital One, their CIO, just made a big statement that he's going all cloud. And this is when people thought you couldn't do it because of security and everything. And so we saw that one person bought $600 worth of Datadog, like $600 ARR. And and here's another reason to work in the office, by the way. I was in the cafeteria getting some food that I was about to eat at my desk and keep working just like we all did. And I saw a couple of sales engineers working hard. And I was like, hey guys, what are you working on? Oh, we're working on Capital One. I was like, oh, wow. How much they're a customer? Yeah. How much do they have? $600. I was like, what's that? 2 servers or something? And then I was like, well, why are you guys working on a $600 deal? And they're like, well, they've just bought 20,000 servers from AWS or something like that, 13,000. I was like, okay, I'd like to work with you on that. So we start working on it, yada, yada, to get to the place. They're actually on the verge of rolling out their first production application, and they need to get all the metrics set up. And they tried it with this other product. There was called SignalFX. They tried it with AppDynamics, and they had a Linux update happen. And this is just us talking about being hands-on. Like, I'm not sitting at my desk. I'm not managing from afar. I'm there with the guys. We're slacking like on a Sunday night that the engineer says, hey guys, his dashboard has just went down with the other products and he's got Datadog working. They're going to release tomorrow with Datadog for their QA. So it's like, okay, boom, we got it. Now, and we go to DC the next morning and meet with those guys, and we write it all up, take screenshots, and now we are presenting it. So now, to get back to your question, how do we earn our way up? That's how you earn your way up. Like, when you're intimate with the business, you're figuring out what are their problems, and we're making sure the product's working. And when it does, we are singing it from the mountaintops. And so we're working our way up. So we kept working our way up to the next person till we got a meeting, which I think may have been, Olivier can tell you if it's true or not, but I think it was the first time he met, certainly with an enterprise customer. And all of a sudden, that was our first enterprise deal. And it was for $1.4 million. And we had never had a deal like that before. And that was about 6 months in.
Was Nigel Morris there?
I don't recall someone named Nigel Morris.
He was the founder. He's this Welsh guy.
Oh, really?
We can take this out, and he's a very old friend of mine. And he, with Ollie, is an investor in the fund.
Oh, get out of here! This is like Capital One.
Yeah, the founder of Capital One.
Oh, I heard great things about him. Very data-driven guy, right?
Oh, fucking amazing! I love it. One of the most humble guys in the world. Really, one of the best. That is amazing. I do just want to go back to the structure and the framework there, and just be like, if you're honest, most sales reps are like screaming for pipeline, screaming for anyone to be a potential buyer today, if we're honest. Mm-hmm. If we're really cynical and take a very granular view to qualification, to look to weed people out, Dan, I'm going to have fucking no one. And I'm going to go to my sales leader and my pipe's going to be pretty empty.
So a mistake I've seen, so in working with a few companies over the past couple of years, they're trying to qualify in the beginning, and you need to light them up with like excitement. You need to get them on the hook by getting them as excited about what you have as you are, right? And so there's going to be some balance in the beginning of you think you're barking up the right tree at the very least because, hey, it's Capital One, right? They buy a lot of stuff, or whatever you know about the company. You have a hypothesis. You have some sort of. You can look on Crunchbase. You can look on TechCrunch. You can like do some research. Get on GitHub. Whatever you're going to do to understand. I have an idea. I have a hypothesis, and so when you reach out to the person, we're talking outbound, right? And so. To be able to, and also I saw your video on YouTube. I saw what you wrote on Twitter. Like, to me, you need to differentiate yourself by the way you show up. And the way you show up is going to be, I've done research. I am coming in with value. I'm not coming in saying, we're a cloud monitoring product. We're based in New York City. We have 500 employees. Don't do it. Don't even waste your time. But like, saw on Twitter, you're implementing Redis. Our other customer something.com just implemented Redis. Here's the video. Here's his link on GitHub. Would love to help you and would love to see if this is interesting to you, to see if we can help you guys have the similar success. That's step one, right? Something like that. Next, 2 days later, hope you enjoyed that link about Redis. Also saw you're trying to implement Kafka here, or right, Kubernetes. We've implemented Kubernetes ourselves. Here's a link with some of the some of the dashboards our own people are using. Like, okay, do I have your attention? Like, I'm not some knucklehead just trying to like make some money. I'm trying to help you, and I've done research and I've learned about you. This is some of the techniques that we use.
Do you think outbound still has a place in 2024? I'm getting inundated by emails now. I mean, like,
Yeah.
and they're all, and AI will make that worse. Do you think outbound still has a place?
The same conversation has been happening my entire career. And so my answer is yes. It's just, you just need to get better and find a way to become the signal amongst the noise, right? And
should AEs do their own outbound, or should we fully give to SDRs?
asking somebody else, so I call it pipeline generation, PG. Asking somebody else to do PG for you is like asking them to go to the gym for you. I think it creates I don't think it creates the right culture to think that this is something that can be outsourced. And so the way I look at it is PG is everybody's job. And so whether you're a sales leader, AE, SDR, we're all constantly trying to we are in the deal creation business. And when I said to you, and I sent you an email that sales leaders should run to the front of the sales process. And I can guarantee I think every time I've talked to a company for the first time, I don't want to lead the witness. So I don't want to say, hey, what do are you focused on pipeline generation? Because their answer will be, yes, of course. More, I'm going to say, hey, what'd you do this week? What meetings did you go on? What'd you do on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday? What meetings, with companies, where stage in the sales process? I can start to see, are they out in the field? Are they, and most of them, if they are doing any customer meetings, are in closing mode. They're trying to be the closer. And if you don't have enough pipeline and you have a really high close rate, you're not going to hit your number. But if you have a ton of pipeline, and even if you have a lower close rate, you're going to hit your number. And probably a bunch of those deals are just going to close next quarter anyway.
Okay, so I'm going to pit you against your mate, Degnan. Degnan said on the show to me, hey, if you have more than, I think it was 8 meetings a week, it may have been 5 or 8, you're not going to be doing well. Like, you need to do qualified research. It needs to be really well informed. So if you're doing more than 8, you're not going to show up well. Agree or disagree? And how do you think about that pipe versus quality?
I think he has a good point. I think it depends on the stage of the company, but generally speaking, I would agree with him that quality, you don't want to sacrifice quality for quantity. And so I was basically, so the other thing I'd say about instrumenting the business, and you sent me something about operational. And so when you think about being a sales leader, you've got kind of 2 sides, right? One side is the inspirational sales leader who can get everybody fired up, who can convince a customer to win or to do the deal. And then the other side is the metrics-based, data-driven, let's instrument the business the right way. And so part of instrumenting the business too is to distill down to the minimum number of metrics that you need to run the business, because I don't want the salespeople spending all day in Salesforce. I want to know just a few things. So the number of meetings that I tracked, to go to the number of meetings topic, was always number of new business meetings. And number of opportunities added to the forecast. So I was not ever really managing the number of meetings per week. I want to know, did you add a qualified opportunity to the forecast this week? And did you have new business meetings, which were basically discovery meetings and demos? And so I can know, like at Datadog, when I left, it was one of each of those, a new pipeline opportunity that's got a specific definition, and a new business meeting for enterprise, and 2 for SMB. And if I had those, I guarantee you're going to make your number this year, and you're going to make more money than you ever made before, and you're probably going to get promoted. Do those things. And so those were the only number of meetings I managed to.
My challenge is, in a world of PLG and just in a world of kind of try before you buy and more individual advocates, what started small can become very big, as you saw with Capital One. But it's very easy to do what you said, which is $600. Who cares? And so how do you think about not diminishing importance from accounts because of their small entry point and giving justified weight on what they can be?
Oh man, such a good question. That's why you're so good at this. So, we got a relaxed vibe going. So people wearing hats, sitting on couches. So when we started the enterprise at Datadog in early 2017, as I mentioned, there were no big deals to be had. We were lucky that we were able to pull off that Capital One deal. A little bit of great execution and a little bit of luck, and but those deals were not around at other companies because Capital One was such a leader going to the cloud. So I had to convince the enterprise people. This is like with Olivier, it was like, as long as it's a real project solving a real problem, we kind of don't care how small the deal is. Our hypothesis was that this cloud thing was going to take off. And when it takes off, whoever's in the stack is just going to scale with their applications. And so, which is kind of like, to me, what I saw with Snowflake. And, but this is real time. So we didn't see this yet. This is 2017. So our idea was just get in there and be part of it. And if it was like generally speaking, probably minimum for the enterprise was $10,000 ARR, right? And because then you got enough servers there's some heft to it. It's a real project, and it happened all the time. But in the beginning, it was a leap of faith because their quota was over $1 million. And so they were like, Dan, how are we going to make any money here when we're doing all these small deals? And just like, hey, have faith that it's going to grow. It's going to grow. Once it actually took off, then we didn't need to convince anybody. But there's that period of time when you're transforming an organization before you have enough victories to prove your idea that you have to keep everybody in the boat. And I say that you need to be in the boat with them. And partly because you're making it happen, partly because they need to see that you're with them. Like, we're taking this hill and I'm with you. I'm carrying the flag up front. And also so you can gain the pieces of feedback that you will need to iterate. Like, maybe some of the things are not working. Like, for example, the demo in the beginning was just walk people through the features. We had to tell a story. I had to it was a little extra hard because the SEs at that time did not report to me. And so, but still it's like, guys, we need to tell a story. We need to show something more compelling, yada, yada. So little things like change the demo, et cetera. And then they could see we're getting better.
What are your biggest lessons on how to do a sales demo well? And where do most people fuck up?
Make sure that you do the discovery ahead of time and you understand their pains, and think about it in terms like, put yourself in the shoes of the customer. And it's not about features, and it's not about show up and throw up. And you want to be able to say, hey, Joe told me that he's trying to make decisions, but doesn't have the right information, and that led to application downtime. And so we're going to show you an example of how you can do that in your environment. And so here's, you told me you have, a Unix machine. Here's a Unix machine. So they can start to see themselves. It's like telling a story. It's like if you're reading, I started reading The Great Gatsby. And so you're like, and by the way, holy cow, I've never written one sentence as good as the worst sentence in that book. But if you are going to identify with the protagonist in the story, then the author has you. And it's the same thing with the demo. Like, I need to see myself in this story, and I can see how my life gets better. I can see how I get better at my job. I can see how I get home to my family earlier. I get promoted. I get kudos from my boss, things like that.
You said about show up and throw up. Didn't sound great. Any like glaring, oh God, so many reps do this that they shouldn't do.
John Kaplan is a great sales trainer and leader. He has a company called Force Management that I've used at multiple companies. And he says, you don't come in with your hair on fire and the product manual in your hand, like that's what a lot of people do there. And if you don't know how to sell, then you're going to think, I'm going to show up and show you all the features. Look, we can do this. Look, we can do that. Look, we can do this. And then back in the day, they would call it taking a plate full of spaghetti, throwing it at the wall and see what sticks. And it's just like, I'm going to keep saying things to you that we can do until you say, oh, that's cool. That's a terrible way to sell. And you're just wasting time. And really, in the end, what are we talking about? We're talking about maximizing the valuation of companies, right? And so when I think about what my purpose is, always is the money is in the equity, right? You can have a good you can have a good commission check, but really when it comes down to it, the money is in the equity. And whether it's your first one or your second one, I've done 5 startups, 4 of them had good outcomes. And each time I got more and more of my compensation from the value that I created in the company. And so all of these, if you think about that movie, Any Given Sunday with Al Pacino, it's a game of inches, right? And if you can get a little bit here and a little bit there, all of a sudden it adds up to a lot, and all of a sudden you're winning.
We know that it's getting serious now. The notebook with
Ooh,
pen is
look
coming.
at that.
We're very professional.
Harry Stebbings taking notes. I love it.
Trust me. So my first thought to you here is like when we're in that sales demo, I had David Schneider on the show.
Oh yeah, I listened to it. He's phenomenal.
Fantastic.
Phenomenal.
And he said there are 3 reasons why people buy software. This is why my job's so great. I basically get to sit with amazing people, hear them give me advice, and then regurgitate it back to people and hear what they think. But he said there's 3 reasons they buy software. 1, to save money, 1, to make money, and the 3rd reason, to keep them out of prison.
Yeah.
Do you agree with that when you hear that?
Dave is talking there truthfully about like more probably corporate motivations. And those are important, but they're also abstracted away from the motivations of the people you're actually selling to. And so both of those are important. The ones that are going to cause those magical moments, it depends on the person, but probably are more about personal motivations, right? Which is, holy shit, I'm not going to get my bonus unless I can show that we are compliant with SOC, standards for security by December 15th. Right. And you should know that as a salesperson. You should be familiar enough. And this is another reason to get out of your office and get off Zoom and go to the customer's building and hang out with them and spend time, because 58-minute meeting on Zoom where everybody else is paying attention, people are not sharing some things that maybe they're going to share when you're just hanging out, right? Having a beer at TGI Fridays after the meeting, or at Starbucks, or whatever it is. Like, that's why I say old school is the new school, and it's the good school, because the things that worked for the Fuller Brush salesman or IBM or Wang or, HP back in the day, it'll always work because humans don't change. And so the technology has changed. You have some PLG, you got Zoom, great, use it, but don't use it at the expense of the connecting with people and becoming more intimately familiar with the personal drivers of the people you're selling to.
You mentioned also like, hey, we're very happy going in, taking a small contract because we believe in X and we believe in the expansion and we let them expand.
Yeah.
Dude, Degnan says customer success à la poubelle, which means to the trash. Do you agree?
So such a controversial topic because customer success, listen, and so CS, is it technical support? Is it a less well-trained, less well-paid sales team? Like, what are you actually really trying to do here? And I think based on the product, there might be different explanations. At Datadog, there was something brilliant there where, I don't know if you've talked about this with anybody, but so we focused the commercial team, which really focused on startups. And so we would get them focused only on new logos. It was incredible. we could break into, and I would say this is true about enterprise, and I say this is true about Medallia, and this is one of the things I feel very proud of, is that my teams, once we got going, we will get a meeting with somebody who could influence a deal in 30 to 45 days in any company, like a real meeting. And part of that is you have to be focused and you can't be distracted because human nature is such that you're going to seek pleasure and avoid pain, right? And you're going to avoid the hard work. That's like we were talking about going to the gym, but most people don't do it because it's hard, even though it's so good for you. And so the same thing with outbound and pipeline generation and breaking into new accounts. And so we gave them, when they broke into a new account, whether it was inbound or outbound, doesn't matter. They had 4 months to sell more products, to take advantage of some of the growth that they might have because of a consumption model. And then after that point, it was passed over to customer success. And now in a one product world, that was great. And we originally had one product, infrastructure monitoring. Now, some of those really small accounts had weird names like Airbnb or Zendesk that nobody ever heard of until everybody heard of them. And so the CAC was incredible because the growth was non-commission because CS did not have commission, right? So that's pretty incredible. Now, if you look at in a multi-product world where you then have to go back and sell multiple products, or once things started to get competitive, then you want to have somebody who's got more sales capabilities. So the answer is, I think you got to have to design it for your company based on what you're trying to accomplish. Generally speaking, listen, that model that I described, Datadog is worth what, $40 billion. You can't question anything that's done. It was a phenomenal success, but could that work in every company? I'm not so sure, right? And would I personally replicate all of it? Maybe not. Some of it for sure, because some of it was fantastic.
How do you think CS should be comped?
It depends on what they're doing. And because the other thing is for the enterprise, so we had CS for enterprise. So when you have a cloud-based startup, they have cloud ninjas. Now, more people are cloud ninjas today than 7 years ago. When we went into some of the enterprise companies, the cloud skills were not as predominant, right? And so they needed more help. And you're working your way through bureaucracy, you're working your way through people that have older sets of skills. And so what we needed there was not somebody to clip the coupons every year. It's for the renewal. Like, hey, you're using more. Should you buy? You should commit to more. It was, how do you actually implement this stuff? Even though we designed the product so that you wouldn't need implementation services. Once we broke past the early adopters of the cloud and we started to work with the legacy folks, then we needed more help. So for enterprise CS, it was more about kind of like implementation and support. For commercial CS, it was kind of like a sales kind of capacity. So I think you got to figure that out from your model too. And so you think about how much are we paying? And I think if you're early stage, just let's get people to buy this stuff, right? Like we are trying to figure out our product market fit. We're trying to figure out how to have what sales process is repeatable, all that stuff. And you're going to iterate and figure out, are we paying too much here? Are we paying too much there? You're probably not paying too much for new logos, new business units, new products, breaking into new segments like enterprise. I think you have opportunities on the back end to see the revenue that's coming in that maybe is going to come in no matter who's sitting at the keyboard. You might have opportunities to really get efficient there. Anyway, what do you think of that?
You mentioned repeatable sales there,
Yeah.
and knowing when you have it. I'm getting into a really core problem for a lot of people, but I just want to first define, what does a sales playbook mean to you?
In an ideal world, I can take somebody from the outside, take them to new hire training. And when we were doing new hire training, my last two companies, when I was running all that, in the new hire training, we would get outbound meetings. Your first days, we are cold calling. And I have it all documented that these are the personas. These are the challenges they have. This is some of the terminology you need. These are the things you can say. Here's how you handle objections, all that, right? So that's like front end of the playbook. Now, discovery call, right? Format for discovery call, questions to ask, how to manage it to be pithy and concise, 30 minutes. Are we barking up the right tree? Do they agree to that, to move towards our next steps of having a demo with the right people in the room, right? Demo. So chronologically working through every step. And in the beginning, if you are a new CRO and you're like, oh, I don't know all this stuff, you can have it's a generally repeatable framework, right? Where you're going to say, I'm going to identify my ideal target customer, ICP, people call it these days, my outbound, calling, emailing, LinkedIn, GitHub, whatever. And now I'm going to discovery, how I do that, demo. What do we show in the demo? What are our desired outcomes? What are our exit criteria for each of those? Like if they say, yes, we think this is the right product for us. Yes, we would like to move to some sort of validation. Then you can leave. Yes, I will commit to getting you to a meeting with the economic buyer, something along those lines. Then I have exit criteria to go to the next phase of validation.
This sounds like quite a lot, if I'm honest.
Yeah.
And so when I hear you talk about this, I then go back to the statement that I'm often told, which is founders should be the one to create the sales playbook. And I'm thinking, gosh, I don't know many founders that could create that pithy qualification 30-minute cool criteria as well as you just did there. I don't think many founders can create the sales demo templates for different verticals. Should the founder be the one to create the sales playbook?
I've never seen it. So to me, with all these kind of, should this be the case? Should that be the case? Like, okay, like somebody might have an academic idea. Show me how it's actually been done. I would say at Datadog, Amit probably did it. I know he did, right? He did it before I got there, but it wasn't like what I just described. It was more like there's some marketing that they see that talks about implementing the cloud. There's a link. You link to the demo. You get an online 1 week demo. You put your credit card in. Somebody calls you to do the deal, and now you have Datadog, right? Something like that. And that's a great way to get started, but you're not going to scale to billions of dollars of revenue, at least in my experience with that. Like you're going to need more of what I just described. And every place I've ever been, that's been the sales leader doing that.
Okay, so it's the sales leader who does that. Great. When I had Chad Peets on the show, who was fantastic, by the way. God, this guy does not hold back. He was amazing.
One of the best recruiters of all time.
Yeah, Degnan said that actually. But he said that you have to hire a CRO pre-product. He said that to provide context, fundamentally, founders are often very product or engineering centric, and they can't do customer discovery, qualification, feedback in the way that you need to. And so you need a CRO pre-product. Agree or disagree?
I wonder if you could even say Snowflake was an example, because Chris Degnan now is not Chris Degnan 9 years ago, right? Or 8 years ago. At the time when he joined, if I recall, he was more of like a first line leader, second line leader, super talented, a lot of headroom. But Dan Fougere 2016 is not going to a pre-revenue company. Like I went to Datadog, Carlos goes to MongoDB to build that sales organization.
And for context, Datadog was 60 million in ARR.
60 million when I went there. At that point in my career, when I'm like a legit CRO candidate, I had done most of the things at Medallia and led global, built the field, like a lot of stuff. So I hadn't been the CRO, but I did a lot and I was ready for the job. And a $60 million a year company doubling year over year, that's where I'm going. So if you're good enough to go to a company that's 60 million ARR, 100% year over year growth, why would you go to a company that has zero revenue growth and zero revenue? So I just don't understand it myself. It's an interesting thing to try. I think having a salesperson there.
Well, Jason Lemkin says you'll never get a great sales leader willing to do it twice, because it's so freaking hard in the early days. You'll get a Dan Fougere at the start of your career, will take that early sales role, leadership or not, because no offense, dude, you don't have that much choice, and it's 2 million an hour, whatever. Yeah. But you're not going to go back to a 2 million hour once you've taken it to 100.
To me, there's two different splices off of this question. One is, would you go back to a smaller revenue company? And I did. Like, I was at Medallia, which was at the time 300 million a year, and I went to Datadog for 60 million a year. Turns out to be a good choice, right? And I went back in revenue. The other question is, after you do this, you know, would I go and do the CRO job again? And the answer is no, because I don't have to, because it's super hard. Scott Davis calls it chewing glass. Like, would you chew glass if you didn't have to? And the answer is no. And the way I look at it, generally speaking, if you're doing the job right, it's probably the second hardest job in the company after the CEO. It's the most quantifiable as far as performance. Like, you know, OKRs are not necessarily thrown up in front of the board. And if you miss them, they're thinking about firing you, as much as if you miss your sales targets, they're all thinking, do we have the right guy? And you're thinking about that every day, every moment. And so much could go wrong, right? There's so much pressure. And so,
does it get easier with time? When you're like 5 years in the role and you are a legit sales leader and you're Ollie's right hand, are you like, I'm not going to get fucking fired?
Yes. And so here's again, the answers are all in the context of growth phase, really, right? Because could I go to another company where the hard work's been done and be the exec and clip some coupons? Sure. But if you're talking about, hey, there's no enterprise sales, there's no messaging, there's no forecast. Like when I went to Datadog, I asked, hey, what's our forecast for the month? And the sales leader said, I don't know. Right. Like we had to build all that. And so doing all of that again sounds too difficult, right? If you don't have to do it. And so if you haven't had the big hit and you still have to do it, then you keep doing it.
Can I be blunt, Dan?
Yeah.
You came from very humble beginnings. You mentioned your father there and kind of growing up in the countryside earlier. How is money what you thought it would be?
Even though I was part of 4 IPOs, the last 2, which were the life-changing ones, you have like car changing, kitchen changing, house changing, right? And then there's life changing. And it took me both Medallia and Datadog happened in 2019. And then you got a 6-month lockup. And then I was an executive officer at Datadog. So that was on a automated selling, right? Like you can't just say, I want to sell all this stock, because then it gets published and like, what's going on? There's a problem. So you create a spreadsheet and the bankers just automatically sell. So I didn't have all of it until like 2021. And so at that point I was 50 years old. Not only was my dad a cop, but for a lot of my time, both my parents were unemployed. I had a lot of debt. I had enough time where I every time I use my credit card now, I still expect it to be declined every time, because I just had such a long period of time where I defaulted on my credit cards and everything. And it took me until I was 50 years old to make that money. Thank God, because I was fully formed, I would say. And I could see how making a ton of money can distort reality for people. So on that dimension,
how does it distort reality for people?
When it comes in a way like it did for me, it's all public. Most of it's public information. Anything I sold while I was CRO of Datadog is all public information. And so it's almost like a supermassive object distorting space-time. And so your idea of like, what's a lot of money? I don't know. Well, if yesterday you made $67 million, if that much money went into your bank account yesterday, then in that period of time, you're like, I don't know, like what I used to know what a lot of money is. And there's a little bit of that during that period of time. What I've found is afterwards, you kind of like, your decaying sinusoid gets back to steady state. And now it's like, okay, I'm back to reality. But during that period of time, it's like a black hole.
That's a lot of dollars.
It's crazy. I know.
Okay. So the point being then, does it make you happy?
Some of the changes in your life certainly relieve previous stresses, you know? I mean, for most of...
What's the biggest ones?
So even at my time at Medallia. So when I went to Medallia, I was at BMC before, and I all of a sudden I went back to a startup, go from the cushy confines of the big company, and I was making less than half as much for an annual salary. As I mentioned, I got 3 babies. I just had bought a house that was twice as expensive. I thought we were going public in 2 years. Sequoia-backed company, great board. 4 years in, I had been eating into my savings, and I ended up paying a bill with a HELOC check. So I paid like a bill with a loan, basically a loan against my house. And like I'm like at a breaking point, and this is just where it's like your expectations on, and this is also gets into a conversation about letting your employees get liquid and doing secondaries, which was not happening there.
Are you sleeping at that point?
Now, I was very stressful. And also, like I said, like I told you about, we had the cold call into COOs, CEOs, not even IT, like the people running big companies. And these are big chunky deals. It's not like you're getting like 100 deals this quarter. We're getting like 20 globally. So it's a very stressful time, which is kind of goes back to why would you do it again if you didn't have to? At least that period of time, that growth period, especially for a company like that where you don't have the PLG and you don't have the wind at your back, and you're making the wind.
You said 67 from Datadog. What was Medallia?
Well, Datadog was a lot more than that, but Medallia was...
How much was Datadog?
Well, it's all public information. So generally speaking, a CRO is going to have like 1%, so something like that. And Medallia was not in that category, but it was still life-changing. It still was like normal crazy money.
I do want to touch on an element though, which is important because we have so many PLG founders that listen.
Yeah.
And you said something great before, which is PLG is great, but PLG with a world-class sales org is better.
Yeah.
And I read that and I was like, great. But when should you layer on the world-class sales org to the PLG? And how do you advise founders on that?
Maybe one way to answer it, and I'll answer it in other ways as well, is as the founder, if there's that voice in your head or that feeling in your stomach where you're like, I wish I had a better salesperson right now. I wish I could break into the enterprise. I wish I could go up market. I wish I could do 3-year contracts instead of month to month. I wish I could do bigger deals. I wish I could sell multiple products instead of one product. Whatever it is, that voice went off in your head. Like it's probably time. And it probably was time before that, because the other thing I was thinking about, like if you're running a race, like you're a runner. And so if you're running a marathon and you don't hydrate until you are thirsty, it is too late because you are dehydrated. And it's going to take a long time for your cells to be able to get that water. And by that time it might be too late. So I think a general feeling or a general ethos that, yes, the product and the product-led growth motion is super important. Of course it is. Excuse me. And I'm going to also build another channel of revenue generation through excellent sales, just like I have excellent product. Like when I went to Datadog, people didn't want to go there. Like recruiting was so hard. And part of it was the reputation that it was an engineering company. They didn't respect salespeople. And some of it was true, right? I mean, but that's why I wanted to go there, because I thought I can make a great sales culture, but I can't make a great product and engineering culture. And so I'm going to go to a product and engineering culture, and I will build a great sales culture, because those two things together will be more powerful than 2 + 2 = 5, right? And that was the hypothesis, and that's what worked out to be true.
How do you make a great sales culture?
I think you've got to have the vision. And the vision is that we will be great, that this is going to be what I said I put a mission statement up that I stole from one of my mentors at Medallia. And I iterated a little bit at Datadog that we will be known, we will have a legendary sales team that will be known for making great money, making life-changing money, being best in class, and having fun, and that we will learn more. You will learn more and become better at your job during your time working on my team than you would have at any other team during that same amount of time. And you will make life-changing money, and you will never have to look for a job again because the halo of our success will be over your head for the rest of your career, and people will seek you out. That was my first day. I said that to everybody on the team. And I also said that we will do $120 million next year, and we will do 240 the year after that, and we will have the most successful IPO in history of New York. I also said that all in the first week or so. I got in trouble.
Do you actually believe that at the time, or is it a bit of self-inflation just to inspire the team?
I wouldn't have said it if I didn't believe it. But of course, I was also anytime you put yourself out there, like the first time you told people you're going to run a marathon, right? You're like, am I really going to run a marathon? That's that. But I just told people, so now I have to do it. There's a little bit of like burn the ships. I'm putting a stake in the ground. We are doing this. And I'm telling the whole world. And I'm going to commit everything in my life to making this happen.
What are the most common ways sales cultures suck? You've seen a lot of internal companies.
You let underperformers stick around. You don't have a vision for greatness like I just described. You don't hold people accountable for performance. The leader is not in the boat with them. The leader yells at the scoreboard at the end of the quarter or end of the week. How come you didn't get more meetings? How come you didn't do this? Like, well, you should have been in it with them. It shouldn't be a surprise at all. And you should know that because you were on the calls, you were in the meetings.
Underperformers, how long do you know, or how long does it take to know whether someone is a mishire, and how long do you give them?
Human nature is to give them too long. And the saying is like hire slow, fire fast. It's hard though. That's why, being an advisor or a board member is so valuable. I feel like it gives me the ability to give better advice because I don't have the pressure on me, to hit the headcount targets. Every board meeting, when you're in hyper growth mode, like going from 100 salespeople to 200 salespeople in 6 months or whatever, it's so hard. Like you got to hire all over the world. You got to try to have quality control. But if I pull back and say the same thing, like your instinct, your gut tells you, oh, I think I have the wrong hire here. At the very least, now you need a process to see for sure, can this person do it? So you probably need, and the same thing, just from an HR coverage perspective, you want to have like a performance improvement plan documented.
The minute someone's on a performance improvement plan, it's kind of over, no?
I have seen some people pull out, but most people do not. And I always want to, if somebody is just like a train wreck disaster and you know it, just pull the trigger. If there's somebody that you can see that they have, if they only did these things differently, I generally want to give them a chance to do it. But not, it's a short rope, right? It's a short time frame. And I want to see, is their leader showing them? Like we might have a bigger problem. It depends on the size of your organization, but if it's a rep, well, maybe what's the leader doing? And so does the leader have these skills? Is their behavior, the behavior I want to be scaled across the team? So can they tell them what to do, show them, give them feedback after they do it, and confirm that the person now does it and has improved? So at least we have that process in place to see, I've given you guidance. I've showed you how to do it. I've given you feedback. Can you iterate and improve? And if not, then there you have your answer.
You said about holding people accountable to numbers. A lot of people are missing their numbers right now, Dan, and it's hard. how do you advise leaders and sales leaders to keep morale up when sales teams are getting battered?
They should be in it with the people, especially when times are hard. Like as a leader, when times are hard, you got to bring them up. And when times are good, you got to bring them down. We got to keep them steady. Don't get too high on yourself when things are good, and don't feel too bad when things are going tough, because that'll affect your performance. And so you should get in it with them and see, what is the problem? Do we have a product problem, a market problem? Do we have a regional problem, or is it a person problem? Right. And if you've gone through all of that and you're just like, I don't know the answer yet, but I do know it's not a person problem, I think there's like probably a whole set of things to do. First of all, being with them and understanding where the pain is, because sometimes it could be the deals are coming, but they're not coming soon enough. So if you have some financial pressure, there's some things that you can do to be able to alleviate some of that financial pressure temporarily.
Like discounting?
Not like discounting. Discounting should be, these are two separate topics. So, you could even like potentially give some payment ahead of the deal's closing, something like that, if they're doing all the right things. And it's just like they're building a territory, they're building their pipeline, it's taking longer than you thought. There's a variety of these scenarios, right? But the one scenario I would not necessarily say, if you've got, hey, we were growing at 100% a year, now we're growing at 20% a year, and that's a whole different thing. And now we've got a bigger set of problems to deal with. This is not an individual person problem. This is a systemic issue that we need some like major surgery. And I've been in both of those scenarios. If you wanted to go down to discounting, I would, as a general rule, limit. I want as tight a control around discounting as possible. I don't want, for a number of reasons, because without the right leadership, and even sometimes with the right leadership, salespeople left to their own devices will peg at maximum discount 100% of the time. And that is not how we drive maximum valuation. That's not how we protect unit prices for a long-term business. And if you're in a consumption business, if you are going to the lowest discount already, when they have the smallest amount of spend, when they have quadrupled 10x to their spend, they're going to expect bigger discounts. Like it's always going to be expected, right? So the more you can have discounting be controlled higher up in the leadership chain, the better. And we were always trying, when I got to Datadog for sure, I was working with product all the time on how little can we discount? Like it's still not, and you get to a place where if you start losing deals, hopefully we never got to a place where we were losing deals. We could tell that we were close to losing deals, or the friction in the process was such that we knew we were at the limit. And so, okay, that's where the discount should be. And we're going to try to get better by selling better value, by coming up with more products. But in the meantime, that's the limit. And we're going to hold it at like CRO, CPO level. And that way we also have the right data, because if you're leaving up to like 100 different people to decide what the discounting should be, that you have no standard to know that the data is the same, because some people may be approaching it in a vastly different way.
So you shouldn't give independent authority to sales reps to say, listen, Dan, my customer, I know it's tight for you this quarter. Listen, we'll do a 10% this quarter to make it a little bit easier for you. And we really appreciate the partnership.
I never have a problem talking about deals with the people on the team. So you can call me, Slack me, text me, call me, basically 24/7. I got to sleep, I got to eat, I got to work out. Besides that, I'm yours. And we can talk about discounting on deals. Sometimes automating something is not the right thing. Making less friction in discounting. I would rather have the sales team resisting discounting to the customer instead of taking that same energy and effort and trying to jam me as the CRO for discounting. Like, we got to protect the value of the product. And if it takes like one more day to like come back to them, versus me knowing that at scale, we have just protected the unit price, because everybody shares, people talk, and, you know, whether it's other sales reps talking about the discount they got, customers talking about it with other customers. And so I think you want to hold on to that thing and manage that and make it not a source of frictionless.
Dan, does customer validation on logos really work? And what I mean by that is, we have Dropbox and Uber and Facebook and Pinterest. And so everyone else goes, oh, wow, they must be legit. Or does it not really work and everyone buys in isolation?
You got to have it in your first conversations and first meetings, right? To have some credibility. You got to have it if you have it. If you have it and you don't tell people, then you're leaving something on the table. But the more that the skin of the onion gets peeled back, the more substance you're going to have. And
but should we discount for customer testimonials? No.
Nah, I don't think so. I think people do it because you're delivering value for them, and because you build relationships with them. And I wouldn't want to trade economics for really like non-economic support.
When it comes to hiring, I think most founders actually really fuck up sales hiring. When you think about lessons from hiring great sales reps, what are your biggest lessons that you know now about hiring reps that you wish you'd known when you started? When
I started, it's almost like Moneyball. If you ever saw that movie or read that book.
Great movie.
Back in the day, they were picking baseball players because they had a good jawline, because the guy's wife was pretty. Like, it's mind-boggling, but that's how scouts were picking baseball players. There used to be some of that in sales. What I would say is they come in all shapes and sizes. Also, for each company, there's a little bit different. Like at Medallia, we needed somebody who could show up and have a meeting with a C-suite exec, and didn't need to get into technical details, because it was not a technical sale. It was hey, we envision a world where companies are loved by their customers and employees. You know, my mom can get behind that. At Datadog, super technical sale. So I wanted to make sure they could handle the subject matter. So one thing I might ask is, I generally ask this all the time anyway. So I'm gonna go backwards. I'm gonna want to know your life journey. I want to know your life trajectory. Where'd you grow up? What'd your parents do? What were you into in high school? What's the highest level math you ever took? You know, I'm getting a read, because, for example, in the US, if you are reasonably good at math, you will have touched on calculus or pre-calculus at the end of high school. If you're not, then you didn't. And so I'm just getting data points around what you're good at, and your trajectory. Are you making decisions based on going for something great, based on a hypothesis that's educated, or are you just going wherever the recruiter says you should go?
You want people who are good at maths, because I'm shit at maths.
It's not,
but I can tell a story like no one else, and I don't think mathematicians tell stories.
It's a data point, and so it's a data point for something like a Datadog or a BladeLogic. If you need to get into the guts of a technical sale, then understanding technical concepts and being able to articulate how they work, like how the machinery works, is valuable to help you tell that story. Something like a Medallia, Salesforce, a Workday, who cares, right? I can help your HR department work better, or your customers can give you feedback, right? Different concepts.
And so we have this line of questioning. Any others in terms of how to discover, detect the best?
I personally look for discipline in salespeople, because we're asking you to do hard things. Like, my teams, I would say, are different than most sales teams. And that's why we get different results, like the outbound qualifying, accountable, accurate forecasting.
Do you warn them ahead of time? Like, I'm going to beat the shit out of you, and this is going to be the hardest job.
But I
And,
don't. I would say there's something in it that says like the messaging that this is not going to be a sit back and enjoy the ride kind of team, right? But I don't think of myself as beating the shit out of people. I would not do that. Like I
get it. I mean it more in the way that like this is going to challenge you in a way that nothing ever has done before. You will get calls on weekends, and we are going to build something amazing. But do not come if you think this is going to be easy.
They probably get that through the process, and it's as the CRO, I have other people who are the hiring leaders, and they can share their stories. But it's just like, hey, this is the hardest place I've ever worked, but this is the best place I've ever worked. I feel great about myself. The other thing I would like, for example, when we would do club trips, where the significant others come on the club trips, I had so many spouses and significant others come up to me and talk to me about how happy they were, about how their significant other has become a better person, has become more fit, they're a better father or whatever, because it kind of, all this stuff kind of translates into your life too. Like, do what you say what you do, deliver on the results, do the hard work, transparency, accountability, consistency, all that stuff to me ends up making us better people as well.
How do you detect discipline in sales candidates you're interviewing?
Fitness is one thing. It's not universal, but like I had one guy who was phenomenal, who was at Medallia. He's into video games and music, and he's just, that's his world. And he is great at those things, and he takes them seriously. I just had, it's a little bit of a different model, right? Doing something hard and sticking with it. So the other thing is, if you were at a startup, anybody who's been at a pre-IPO company that's done well for sure, but you're going to deal with some very hard times. Like things are not going to go the way you thought. It's going to be harder than you expected. Did you stick? Are you one of these people who leaves every 18 months? Or were you there for the full 4+, right? If you got a 4-year vesting cycle, kind of like, to me, it's like getting your university degree. Did you stick it out and make it, right? And did you?
I always say I hate bouncers, which is the 1 year, 1.5 year, 1 year, 1.5 year, 1 year, and I'm like, what have you actually done? The onboarding was 3 months, your offboarding was 3 months, you were there for 6 months fully.
Fortunately, I made one mistake and I got out in 3 months, because that's how long it took me to find another job.
What were the signals that you had made a mistake?
It was a little bait and switch. They told me that I would have headcount to hire, and then they wanted me to be the rep. So, and there were a lot of things like that where the things that were said were not true. And if we're in the honeymoon phase and you're already telling me things that are not true, get out, because it's only going to get worse.
Should we do sales demo tests in the hiring process? Like, do we do take homes, case studies?
I always have them do a test. And the test involves presenting back to us. And I try to...
Your company, their company, another company?
Try to do our company. Here's where I ended up, is that I want them to sell the company that I'm at now. I want us to give them a company to sell to. And I want to give them like 3 days and come back and you be the rep. And it tells me a lot. Based on, in some ways we found that kind of like the perfect amount of time to spend on it is like 3 hours, because it's enough time to do the job. If people who spend less time, they're not, their quality of their work output is probably not going to be good enough for our team. People who spend more time, this is just generalization, maybe take too long to make decisions and get the work done. So they're not going to be able to move as fast as we need to. But it tells us, can they get out there, do their own research? Are they a compelling presenter? Do they get it? Would we buy from them? And do they want the job enough to go do this really hard thing?
Can I ask you just one final one, Dan, which is like, I have so much respect for you. And when I hear the journey, it's like, it all seems to have been like up and to the right. Carlos told me there was one moment in particular, which was not up and to the right, which was when you moved to the West Coast for Medallia.
Yeah.
And bluntly were like on track to be CRO and then didn't get it. I'm just interested. Can you talk to me about that and how you learned, developed, grew as a person from that?
Well, that's like the deep tracks right there. You went, you found out some juicy stuff, spicy. Yeah, I mean, I gave you some of the background about Medallia. I put my heart and soul into that place. We invented how to sell Medallia. They did not have any kind of repeatable process before we got there, and we drove that thing. We got it to, we were doubling year over year. Got it to like in the 200 million-ish, 250. It had taken them 10 years to get to 25 million. And a few years later, we're like at 250 and through some brute force. And so a few things happened. Qualtrics caught up to us because they were out developing us. Their product was innovating much faster than ours. We were spending money like crazy. The burn rate was unbelievable. And so they brought in a CFO to try to control that. They made too many changes to the terms of the deals. And all of a sudden growth, like it was like you could feel deceleration trauma. And so now I'm not saying sales didn't have anything to do with it. We weren't perfect. I would never say that, but we were doing pretty great. And all of a sudden we weren't doing pretty great.
Is that fucking frustrating?
Oh my God.
There's nothing in your hands. It's not even market, but this is like, another function's fault.
It was tough, man. It was tough for everybody. And, and at that time, Scott, who was a CRO, wanted to punch out. And so I thought, hey, I'm going to move my family of my wife and our babies to the Bay Area. I'm running towards this thing. And because I have a plan, I believe I know what we can do to get us back on track. And initially I was told I would get the CRO job, and then I was told I could win the CRO job. And it had taken them something like a year and a half to hire the CMO recently. So I was like, okay, I got some time to run. I'm going to make amazing shit happen, and I will win this job, because I was very confident I was the best person on the planet for it. And I would say now that I absolutely, of course, was. But my opinion didn't matter quite as much as the other people's opinions. And so I went there having been told I could win the job. Things didn't feel right. And I found out back channel that they had already made up their mind that they were going to hire somebody else a week after I had moved there. So, just like gutted, man, and besides and here's the other thing. 'Cause it's like, why didn't you just quit? Well, I got 4 years of equity, 4.5 years of equity, more money than anybody in my family for as far back as anybody knows has ever made combined. And I don't have enough cash to exercise. And so if anybody's listening that doesn't know this stuff, that means 90 days after I quit, it would all turn into fairy dust. I couldn't just quit. That's how I felt. And so they ended up bringing somebody on top of me, and I got some really good advice from a mentor who's a phenomenal person in the industry. And he said, this is an IQ test. You gotta go get another job. And I just was like, I don't know how I'm going to find the money, because I had to come up with $2 million cash or more to exercise the options. And I didn't have that. And so I was very distraught. I had a really terrible meeting. And I was on my way home, and the great and powerful David Echeria called me, and he said, hey, first they wanted me to come be the number 2 guy to Carlos at Mongo. And I was like, I've already been the number 2 guy. I need to be number 1 someplace. And then Dave said, well, too bad you wouldn't move back to New York, because I'm on the board of this hot company called Datadog. And so I was like, I'm not moving back to New York, but I already had plans to be back in New York for Thanksgiving the next week anyway. And so if you ever saw that movie, The Rumble in the Jungle, or I can't remember, it's George Plimpton, maybe it's about Ali versus Foreman, the fight promoter, Don King. He told Ali he had Foreman. He told Foreman he had Ali, and he got them together that way. And that's what Dave did with me and the founders of Datadog. And so he set us up. I had no intention of moving back to New York. I did not want to get back into a technical sale. And I didn't even prepare for the meeting. And I showed up at the New York Times building on the 44th floor. And I met Olivier and Amit. And it was a 1 hour meeting. And 3.5 hours later, with every whiteboard in the office filled, I was like, these are my people. Like these guys. I was going from a company where people were kind of being made to feel guilty about wanting to have an IPO and make money, to a company that they had a chip on their shoulder too, because the Datadog founders were told nobody wants a monitoring product. The cloud will never take off. You can't build a company in New York. They had a chip on.
Their early rounds were unpopular. They'll tell you that.
Yeah.
But like, it was not easy to raise the seeds and the A's, and they went against the odds. Yeah.
So people told them they weren't good enough, and people just told me I wasn't good enough. And
did you find the money to exercise the options?
So while I was doing the Datadog job in the beginning, my night job was making a market for Medallia shares. And so I found out that some deal had been done at like $16 a share through the grapevine. And this is like, this is the gray area, because there was no official secondary or anything like that. So I was able to find, there's a company called Forge, which was a lifesaver. And through them, I found somebody who wanted to buy my shares. And I even had to stop some of the people who were disgruntled former employees from saying bad things about the company because they were driving the price down. And then I found another one just on my own, kept talking to every private equity, hedge fundy kind of person I could talk to. I found somebody, and they were sketchy, kind of like questionable deals that I was doing on my own, but I ended up doing them. And I was able to do the second one through Forge. So at least I had like a legit platform to work in. And I was able to get enough to exercise. I had my spreadsheet to find that optimum point where I could sell the minimum amount of shares so I could hold on to as many as possible, but still come up with the amount of cash necessary to exercise all the other shares. And that's how many I sold. And I was able to do it. I negotiated a 2-year term to do it. And I closed my last deal to get the cash with 10 days left.
Fucking hell, what a story. Did the CRO at Medallia who got the job instead of you, did they do well?
Nope. Not a Medallia.
Dan, listen, I want to do a quick fire. I've so enjoyed this. So what have you changed your mind on most in the last 12 months?
I don't know about in the last 12 months, but over my experience over the past few years, that very junior people can do very big deals with the right training and the right leadership. And that is very different than what most salespeople are taught, is that only the most senior salespeople can do the big deals. And at my last company, we had multiple people with low single-digit amount of sales experience, a number of years, do $1 million plus first deals. And I think there's something there where when you look at CAC and you look at efficiency, that if you have great leadership with a great sales playbook, great framework, great training, you can get more productivity out of more junior people. And it's not just some mysterious thing that the person with the 5-page resume can do.
How does AI change the world of sales?
I feel like it's almost like when the Microsoft Office suite came out. That's how old I am. But I was like, oh my God, my spreadsheet pops right into my email and my word processing, and it's all in the same. And all of a sudden I could do so many more emails and proposals so much more quickly. As I see it right now, You can do better research on the companies. You can write a more compelling letter, prospecting email. You can put a proposal together faster. These things, it's going to make you more efficient and effective, which I think so far are all good things. I know that people are working on other things to try to have the robots do all the selling. Let's see how that goes. The thing about AI is they thought, I listened to the AI guys, so the people who actually develop this stuff, right? They said, we thought it would automate the menial labor jobs, like whatever, or just like not to denigrate any jobs, but like truck driving or being an analyst or something. And instead it's making amazing art. So we don't know what it's going to do. But as of right now, I think you want to be able to use it to be better at your current tasks. That's what I see.
A friend of yours is starting a role as a sales leader at a company tomorrow. What advice do you give them?
I want to see wins on the board. Think of it in week 1, month 1, 90 days, 6 months, 1 year. Think about and list out the wins that you're going to put on the board. Game-changing hires, game-changing deals, instrumenting the business, messaging, efficiency, productivity, all those things. Share that with your CEO, agree on something that's realistic, and go do only those things and make that stuff happen.
What question are you never asked that you should be asked?
Who should I hire and who should I fire?
Who should I hire today if I can only hire one CRO?
Sean Walters.
Wow. Why Sean Walters?
He has been able to take over Datadog. I hired him as a rep at BMC right after we were acquired at BladeLogic by BMC. And he went through some super hard times and came out as the top rep and got promoted. He was a leader at BMC and came to be a rep at Medallia. Went through super hard times, crushed it, became a top rep, got promoted. Went from Medallia selling customer experience to Datadog selling cloud monitoring. And in a hostile environment where even his team was wondering who the heck this guy is and why should he be on top of us, and made everybody better. He delivers all the time. He's delivered in multiple roles. He's probably made his number more consistently than anyone I've ever seen. He's super adaptable. He's going to get the job done. And I hear he's learned from the best.
Dude, I love that. I was actually just checking him out. Dan, I love this show because I can take it in any way and it's a very natural discussion. You've been such an amazing guest and thank you for rolling with my very fluid discussion.
Harry, this has been such a pleasure and it's been so fun. And you're like authentic curiosity and interest in what we do is so cool. And I'm just glad to be part of it.